So, in this episode of Tweetstreet, I feature a tweet that was made by a certain woman who was trying to convince other women that them doing shit at a guy's house, or them doing shit for a guy at a guy's house, is supposedly a bad thing and we find it quote unquote disgusting. And when I think about this tweet, it does kind of remind me of how Airbnb, or at least the founders of Airbnb, convinced people into thinking that it's a much better option than going to a hotel. Like, now people are actually starting to realize how much of a BS idea it might be, and they're suddenly now complaining that it's suddenly a problem. Like, you actually thought that cooking for yourself and not having room service is a much better option, even though you probably end up paying the same price. Because when you think about it, it is roughly the same price in a lot of the Airbnbs that people tend to rent, especially around here in Kenya. Because you're finding that guys will go and rent out an Airbnb in some place in Kileleshwa, Kilimani, or Karen or some shit, and they'll end up paying a certain equivalent amount that they'd have probably paid the same exact cost of if, it's them and like their shorty for like a hotel room. And in that Airbnb, somebody has to cook, somebody has to lay things over. At some point when you guys are done like changing up and everything, you might do a little bit of cleaning if you're courteous enough. And you think about it, if that was a hotel, you probably wouldn't have done any of that shit. And you've probably spent the same exact, say, $100 that you would have in a hotel. Like, to a certain degree, it does make you realize that in some ways, people were convinced into trying shit that they thought would be interesting that probably isn't better. Because if anything, it's shown how important hotels are, because it's like a full-on convenience option, because you can order for room service, you will pretty much never have to cook your own food, and you never have to clean shit up. So in some way, I feel like people were actually taught something pretty interesting. Although I'm not gonna lie, Airbnbs have been very, very important. Like, people have managed to cheat without, a paper trail of people knowing what it is that they've done. And that can range from politicians to high-class celebrities. Hell, even regular people can pretty much do this entire thing where it's not like there's an entire list of people that know that you're staying at a certain place. So you can get a bit of anonymity here and there because, if you use someone else's Airbnb account, it won't really trace back to you and shit. Like, it's a very, very smart way of doing shit. Plus, during the lockdown, Airbnbs were the party spots. And as a result of the lockdown, a lot of people did actually become like full-on proper earners from Airbnbs and shit. Although, then again, there is one thing that has been there since before both those things kind of became a thing. And that was this podcast, which I probably should have started by now. Because, this is a new episode of Tweetstreet in a while. And much as it's a new episode, I still want to start it the same old way, in the same typical fashion, where I start by saying, welcome to Breaktime on West Side, your number one Breaktime podcast, coming to you from Nairobi, Kenya. The man on the mic is a man who would not be caught dead cheating in a hotel room, or anywhere for that matter, because I don't cheat. He is a man who likes his women the same exact way he likes his yogurt. It is none other than your tall, dark, and mildly handsome man, Sir Denver B. The show is Tweetstreet, the show where we take a deep dive into Twitter, pull up a couple of tweets and break them down a little bit. Now, as usual, the drill is pretty simple. We've been doing this drill for a very long time, so I'm guessing there's a couple of you that know it. And for those of you all that are listening to this episode for the first time, this is your first episode of Breaktime on West Side that you are listening to, then the drill is pretty simple. It almost even sounds like a song, and it goes like this. You see that tweet, you like that tweet, you want us to discuss that tweet, you send that tweet. You send it to the DMs of @BagakaTheD, which happens to be my personal Twitter handle, and I will take the tweet from there and I will handle it accordingly. If it happens to be a screenshot or a screen grab that you happen to have found on Facebook or on IG, and it's one of those ones that was so good on Twitter that it had to be brought there, then the place to send it to is @Breaktime on Westside on Facebook and @Breaktime on Westside on IG for the IG page with the same exact name. Now, I want us to get into the main tweet of today because I am trying to do shit differently, and considering that it's a new season, I might as well just try something a little bit different here and there and confine it to one tweet. See how dealing with one tweet is as opposed to dealing with 2, 3, 4, 5 tweets is in comparison. Now, before I get to that though, I do want us to talk about what happened on Tuesday, because Tuesday was International Women's Day, and I don't know, I feel like I got the memo a little late because I was finding out at like 10 a.m. at work, so I ended up scrambling to, make a post and post up on the IG page. But more so than that, I don't know, maybe it's the fact that I'm in a generation of people that's growing older, or maybe it's just the crowd of people that I interact with on social media and shit. I feel like this time's International Women's Day, or just Women's Day in general, got a lot more coverage and a lot more publicity than I thought. Babes that I wouldn't even think would care about, international holidays and shit were posting up International Women's Day and shit. And I feel like the more interesting thing was this year they decided to have, a hashtag that was trending and shit. And the hashtag was break the bias, or in some cases, end the bias. Now, obviously I can get that these two hashtags are meaning roughly the same thing, which was, ending, gender biases and shit, and, giving a more equal platform for women, which I found to be particularly odd. Like, I personally felt like it was very, very odd that women were talking about bias, considering that they have some of the best advantages in the name of bias that any gender or species of animal in the animal kingdom actually have on this planet. Like, this is the gender that will have cheaper clothing, that will get in for free during singles night at the club, has most major banks in this country actually carrying financial products that are made for them and only for them, and will, in a lot of cases, almost never pay for drinks. And you are complaining about bias. Like, make it make sense. As in, nowadays when there's job applications that are being pushed out in the corporate sector, which is not supposed to be, gender biased or some shit, there's more and more applications that I'm seeing on LinkedIn whenever I'm trying to throw an application here and there that actually says preferably a woman. Like, not that corporate accounting requires a vagina to work, it's just, we'd much rather have women in here, so if you apply, your chances are actually better. Like, even before I got onto the mic to record this episode, I was looking at a reel on IG where some shorty was talking about how she's leaving to go to the club with only 100 bob, and she will come back when she will have eaten, she will be drunk, she will have come back home, and she'll be dropped back home actually, without having to use up that 100 bob. And now she added the other exaggeratory bits like, having her rent paid and, like getting a bunch of other things here and there. And I thought about it for a second. If this isn't what female privilege is, I don't know what the hell that is. Like, if we could even out most of those biases for us guys, I wouldn't complain at all. I wouldn't mind not paying for drinks at the club. I wouldn't mind getting access to financial products and shit. I wouldn't mind having to pay less for clothes and having discounts on skincare. The only thing I'd have a problem with is fucking the ugly guy that's usually at the end of paying for those drinks, which will probably be expected of you because, one, I am a lover of women, not a fighter of men, and I don't feel like fighting some ugly dude. And two, being dodgy for not paying my drinks is not something that I'd actually like to have in my repertoire. It just isn't. So in some ways, you kind of think about it and it kind of feels a little bit hypocritical that babes are the ones that are complaining about this shit. But anyways, that aside, there was something that was even bigger this week that happened in Kenya. So some lady had accidentally hit a boda boda driver, and I'm sure Kenyans probably already know this story. And because she sort of seemed like she was running away, even though she moved ahead and there was traffic right ahead of her, an entire crew of boda boda riders decided to descend on her and her vehicle and shit. They forcefully opened the door and, for lack of a better way of saying it, they assaulted her and they ended up ripping her clothes and shit. And it actually was something really bad, not just because it was a woman, but because it actually ended up becoming national news. There was a manhunt and the president addressed it. And it's actually because, and we ended up finding this out on like Wednesday, this lady was supposedly, I think, a diplomat or was working for the UN or some shit. So her being sexually assaulted and physically assaulted was actually something that ended up having a blowback on the Kenyan government. And people had their thoughts about this. And, there was, as usual, a fight on Twitter. And, there were fights coming in, people who were busy talking about, guys, go through roughly the same shit. It's just that our clothes aren't ripped, we're beaten, we're killed and shit. And babes, as usual, whenever something like this happens to a woman, decided to run for the men are trash hashtag, use it on everyone else, ask why it is that men do this. And as usual, the other side will have men either saying that it's not all men or those guys weren't men, or they stand with them. Like, obviously, there was all of that. And I know I'm gonna sound heartless, opportunistic, and a little bit inhumane for saying this, but just bear with me. This was a bad thing, but the good thing with it is that it actually forced in regulations on border riders in this country, because they've been very uncouth for a very long time. And because of this, the regulations that have been in place supposedly were actually enforced with an insane amount of force. It was so incredibly brutal that people actually saw a change in like 24 hours and shit. Like, we never usually see that shit happen, but it happened this time, and it was actually a good thing. And while I do sympathize with the woman that went through this entire ordeal, and the numerous women that go through abuse and everything, I usually have a problem with stories like this. Not just because of what happened, because it's not like I support, endorse, or agree with whatever it is that was done to her, but more so because this usually ends up turning into a gender war online. Because on one side, you'll have babes busy calling men garbage, or asking us how it is that we're comfortable with such shit, and how it is that we manage to live so well with the other men that do this. And then guys all of a sudden have to start defending themselves. We say that it's not all men, or like we should concentrate on the individuals and not the general populace of men, and call all of us a problem. Because we also go through shit that's sometimes similar to this, or could be worse, could be better. Not that I'm comparing problems and shit. And then it becomes this back and forth where women are like, but it's us right now, and guys are like, oh, this happens to us as well, we also go through shit. And then it becomes this very nasty back and forth. And I've taken part in it. I've been on the defensive, and frankly, I will say for the record that I feel like what was done to her was bad, and whatever the fuck these guys did was very, very bad. They took advantage of a very bad situation to make it even worse. And honestly, I do wish that they faced the full force of the law. Now, that said, if women could support guys the same exact way all of us decided to support women on Monday in regards to this entire thing, then honestly, I think we'd appreciate it as guys, and probably most of this conflict would stop. But then again, who am I to say this shit? Some babe's just gonna come back and say that I'm missing the point or I don't understand and shit. So I'm just gonna leave it at that and move on to our tweet for this episode. And firstly, I want to start by thanking Winnie for sending this tweet over, because I feel like it is something that should definitely be discussed, and it deserved its own episode, because I feel like the lady that tweeted this was tweeting utter bullshit. And I'm gonna read it for you in a second, because she does talk about the idea of wife material and doing shit for your man. So here it is. If you women knew how some guys find it disgusting that you'll go to their house and start trying to play quote-unquote wife material, you'll actually do better for yourselves. Why are you cooking and cleaning and washing for someone who's supposed to be your host? Have you no shame? You'll be going to people's houses and leaving a bad taste in their mouth. What exactly are you trying to prove? If you go for a dick appointment and his house is unkempt and he doesn't have any food for you, common sense should tell you that he hates you. It's literally the bare minimum. Why are you trying to prove good woman to a man who doesn't have basic human decency? Alright, so the moment I read this, I felt like this was quite possibly one of the dumbest things that a woman has said online, because, well, one, she is trying to speak for us men. And I don't know which guy told her this garbage, but I feel like if it was a guy that told her this man should be sentenced to death by firing squad, because honestly, this is garbage. This is absolute garbage, because this goes against everything that people who've been dating for the past, I don't know, like 40 plus years, at least as far back as I can try and date, have been doing and have done in the name of trying to secure a partner, in the name of trying to show that they're good enough for a partner. Like, what in the fuck was getting into this woman's mind? Because I kid you the fuck not. Like, I have a lecturer, or had a lecturer, because, she's still alive, but I graduated, who actually gave us a story of how she ended up getting her husband and, marrying him and shit. And the story is the exact opposite of what this woman is saying. Because it was literally her and some other babe. They used to go to this guy's place, the now current husband. And I even think I might have mentioned this story on the podcast before. And now this other babe would come to this guy's place, chill for a bit, and then bounce. But my lecturer, what she'd do, she'd go over to this guy's place. She'd find that stuff's thrown all around. The house isn't well arranged. There's not that much food and shit. but there's like groceries that have been bought, and what she'd do a little bit of cooking here and there. She'd help clean up the place, and if the clothes aren't washed, and I guess if it was a need be, she'd probably even wash the guy's clothes. And as is the proof, 30 or maybe even 40 years on, these guys are still together. This guy ended up choosing my lecturer. And I've also given the story of like the Uber driver, the one who was telling me how babes these days have just lost it. And I was busy talking about how babes nowadays do below bare minimum for guys. So even bare minimum such as doing a little bit of cooking for the guy seems like a fuck ton by today's guy standards, just based off of how babes nowadays are with a whole bad bitch mentality. And it's like they don't want to do shit for their mans, but they want to receive everything, because gifting is the love language that all of them understand. And they want good dick, cuddles, and some guy that's gonna try and take care of them in the best way possible. How? Fuck the try, take care of them properly and shit. And you honestly think that after us having moms that did this for our dads, after seeing and hearing about shit like this that was done way back and has been done for the past 10 years, 20, 30, 40, 50, going as far back as the idea of courtship and relationships was sort of a combined thing, are you telling me that what she is saying is actually true? Like, first of all, I'm even gonna say this as a guy, we do not find it disgusting. Actually, we find it very caring. Now, of course, how much we care about it will obviously coincide with how much we care about you. If we don't give a damn about you and all you're doing is just coming to get fucked and then you go back home, and we don't really give that much of a damn about you or your well-being and shit, then definitely, even though you do that, it's not like we'll find it disgusting. We just won't care as much about it because we didn't ask you to do it, and you're doing a little too much for shit that you probably shouldn't even be putting that much work for. But at the same time, if we actually do care about you, if we were actually considering dating you or marrying you, it actually gives you a bonus point ahead, because when you actually think about it, with the way right now dating and courting are sort of like a joint thing. You're in a relationship and you're thinking about, is this the person that I'd want to marry? Is this the person that I'm going to spend the rest of my life with? Then in such a situation, you find that you get a much larger bonus step ahead, because if anything, when we're looking for a wife, we want a good homemaker. Like, yes, we want someone who's beautiful and smart and who can fuck good, but if you're not a good homemaker, yes, we can get a house help and shit if we have the money for it, but will we really care about you all that much? Because your value as a homemaker actually does contribute to you being seen as quote-unquote wife material. And babes nowadays view it as, not a good thing or something of that sort, even though for us guys, we do probably look at it in a much higher regard than a lot of people would probably think. Because in as much as you might think that it doesn't mean jack shit or it shouldn't mean jack shit, when you think about it, babes do the exact same thing. When you're busy vetting a guy as a guy that you'd want to date or settle down with, you're pretty much looking for some version of settle down material or husband material. Because when you can get a guy that provides for you well, that will protect you, and that knows how to give it good in the sheets, 3 P's that a guy has or should have, that's our version of being looked at as husband material. Like hell, shorties look at us as trap material if we're at that level. If we're making good money, and we have the body of someone that can protect them, aka we're not short or we don't have deformities, and we have good dick game. Like, all of that is shit that a babe can choose to trap me with a kid just to have. Like, are you telling me that suddenly guys are going to stop looking at your ability to be a homemaker as a woman and then suddenly be like, you know what, I want to see her career benefits? Like, how the fuck does that shit benefit me? Like, fine, yes, you can ignore all of this shit. You can ignore whatever it is that I've said and listen to this woman and then never do any of the cleaning, never, offer to even try and cook a simple meal when you're at this guy's place, and try telling me what value it is that you have in this guy's relationship. Because if you're a friend with benefits, if you're a one-night stand, then you will be viewed for what it is that you are giving, which is the innards, and you will be nothing more than good pussy. If you are someone that is being dated and you cannot do any of this shit and you're like, no, I'm not gonna do it, go do that shit yourself, it's your house, then guess what? You'll probably be dated But there's a pretty good chance that shit will be short term, because the other babe that will step in and want to do that same shit for your man will most definitely step in, do that shit for your man, and take him away from you. And yes, you can say, oh, she can keep him, he wasn't a good guy anyways. But let's see how many of those guys that you're supposedly trying to be with will be okay with that shit. And this is actually how we end up getting into the whole tables argument, where guys are like, what is it that you bring to the table? Now, babes at this point will start trying to defend themselves. Oh, we are the table. Oh, why do I have to tell you? Blah, blah, blah. Oh, if you've been with me this entire time, then you should definitely know what it is that I bring to the table. And in my head, I'm like, how the fuck are we supposed to know if you aren't even showing us what qualities you would have that would make me want to settle down with you? Like, for me, mine are a little bit more apparent because they're out there. You can see it. If a guy tries to, touch you a certain way, I will step in and I will push the guy back. If some shit goes down, I will step in. If you're crossing the road, I'll probably hold your hand and shit. And those are the little things that show that I can protect. If I'm making good money and I can pay for shit, then it clearly shows that I can provide. Dick, you already know. But when I'm bringing in the things that I'd want to see, the stuff that would make you, the quote-unquote table that you speak of, or seem that your wife material, or you bring to the table, all of a sudden there's someone who's like, no, you shouldn't do any of that shit. Like, don't you think that's a little bit dumb if you were to take up that advice? Or are you one of those people that would suddenly be like, oh, but I don't have to prove anything to you? Well, bitch, you do. Like, you actually do. Because what we have had to prove every single time for us to be seen as viable men is stuff that's outside. The only thing is, you get to see that shit and it's out there. With you guys, it's a little bit more inside. It's a little bit more intangible. So you have to make sure that you prove it, and we have to see it as men. Otherwise, we will go and we will look for somebody that will prove it to us, and then we will end up being with them while you're left there busy complaining that us niggas ain't shit. But then again, maybe I am wrong about this. And I feel like the fellas would probably be the best suited to tell me. Is it suddenly disgusting when a shorty comes and does shit for you at your place? Is the whole idea of having to prove yourself as a woman in the house by doing some shit for me in the house suddenly a bad thing? Is it actually not a good thing for a babe to do? And I am expecting feedback on this from the ladies as well. On Twitter, it is @BagakaTheD, that is my personal handle. On Facebook and on Instagram, it is @Breaktime on Westside. The DMs are open. Thank you so much for listening all the way till the end. And if you are listening through Castbox, feel free to drop your thoughts and comments below, and I will attend to them accordingly. And I will catch you guys on the next break.